Should we be able to bind and sell fanfiction? Let's talk about it. Fanfiction gets a bad rap, and sometimes for good reason. We're not always the most careful with our typos, and obviously sometimes the writing quality in general is not top-notch. There's always been this big divide over whether we should be able to consider fanfiction to be real literature, and I'm gonna argue that it is. And if you don't believe me, please stick around for just a second, because we are going all the way back. Fanfiction is not a new thing whatsoever. Fanfiction has been around for centuries. If you were ever forced to read Dante's Divine Comedy in school, then you know that it's an epic poem filled with characters that he didn't create, just classical figures, myths that people already knew about. And even though, we mostly know the Iliad and the Odyssey, there were multiple versions of Greek stories going around where they either changed the endings or expanded upon the world, which is what forms the basis of fanfiction. Even Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet was based off of previous works. And you could take modern pieces of art like Hamilton, which sort of falls in a mix between biography and fanfiction, because Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton after reading a book about Hamilton, which is about as fanfiction as you can get. And while the platform and publishing styles has changed a bit, the whole spirit of it remains the same, where we're celebrating the stories that we love and adding our own unique spin on them. So saying that some of the most famous pieces of literature and art that we have today could be considered fanfiction, that is sort of where I feel like fanfiction today is real literature, whether a proofreader has gone through and edited the spelling or not. And obviously all those classical pieces, they have sold millions and millions of copies. But when it comes to our more modern fanfiction, there's just a really weird place where we draw the line when it comes to who gets the money and who gets the credit, because some of today's best-selling stories got their start in fanfiction. Let's start with one that you have most definitely heard of, 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. It was originally fanfiction called Master of the Universe, and it was based off of Twilight. Anastasia and Christian were originally Edward and Bella, just in a very different setting. So when she went to go publish it, she couldn't keep those characters' names, but she could keep almost everything else. She switched a few names and settings, and then voila, new book that she owns completely. And whether it's your thing or not, it sold 125 million copies. So obviously she made a crap ton of money off of this, but legally she doesn't owe Stephenie Meyer any money, even though she's built her entire career off of Stephenie Meyer, which is sort of wild if you think about it. And that's not the only one. I just googled what popular books started off as fanfiction, and there are so many. I have not read After, but I knew about it, and I knew that it was One Direction fanfiction with the names changed the same way that E.L. James did with 50 Shades. And this is sort of like a side discussion, but I heard that Harry Styles wasn't very happy about this situation, considering it threw him in a very bad light. But that's a whole nother discussion about writing fanfiction about real people. Apparently, the love hypothesis was Reylo fanfiction from the Star Wars universe, but obviously fanfiction is a huge stepping stone for plenty of authors out there. I mean, that is where Cassandra Clare got the first initial bulk of her audience, was she was writing Harry Potter fanfiction before she wrote the Mortal Instruments series, and now she has an insane amount of books published in the middle grade and young adult categories. Then there's examples that I'm not exactly sure if they qualify as fanfiction or not, because I feel like it's murky waters between fanfiction and just being inspired by other pieces, because It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey is technically based off of Schitt's Creek, which I've never watched, so I couldn't draw the parallels between that. But Sarah J. Maas originally intended Throne of Glass to be a Cinderella retelling. It went real off the rails. But you can still see that overarching storyline, but I wouldn't necessarily call it Cinderella fanfiction, because it has morphed into its own thing. I sat with that idea for a while of where is the line, and honestly the only real separation I can find is where it was first published. If it was something that a person wrote as fanfiction originally, so instead of being based off of Cinderella and starting out with Selena, fanfiction is based off of a book or a movie you love, and you're using the original characters, and then you publish it to a fanfiction platform like fanfiction.net, Wattpad, AO3, anything like that, where it's publicly fanfiction first. I feel like that's a clear distinction that it is fan fiction and not its own separate work from the start. But if they're just changing the character names to detach from the source material and then they go the traditional publishing route without really changing anything else, then that's what I would consider to be fan fiction that got published in a more traditional medium. It is okay to bind it and sell it. And in my opinion, that is the easy way around all of the legal issues that come with binding and selling fan fiction, because I have been seeing that a lot on TikTok. So, in particular, I've seen this a lot with Harry Potter fanfiction, Manacled. I've seen people binding it and then making these nice covers for it and putting it on their bookshelves, which I think is one thing, but I think it's something else when you start selling that. And I can see where the confusion comes from because, I've written fanfiction too. Once you write it, you feel like it's yours. You wrote, at some points, hundreds of pages of content. It's hard to feel like you don't own that. But the problem mostly stems from intellectual property, which can be legally problematic for many reasons. I find so interesting. I am not kidding. There was a brief moment of me being an English major when I was like, maybe I should go to law school. I am so glad that I didn't, but if I had, I would have gone into copyright law because this is just so interesting. So this is about to get extremely nerdy, but if this is your thing, welcome. So first is copyright infringement, which can be a big problem. It says that the original creator, the person who holds the copyright, has the exclusive right to reproduce their own work or to adapt and distribute their creation. Writing fan fiction is technically a derivative work, which is a right reserved for the copyright holder. So basically, authors are the only ones allowed, technically, to write fan fiction about their books. Some of them have, but mostly it's the rest of us. There's also trademarking, which is a little bit different, but to avoid this video being really long, it's in the same vein. A lot of fanfiction authors will come along and they'll be like, hey, but fair use. And that does allow you to use someone else's work and their characters and worlds and stuff without permission, but sort of in a limited capacity. And it has these little subpoints that kind of help you figure out if what you've made is considered fair use. You have to think about if it is for commercial purposes, which selling your own fanfiction is. You change it enough that it is super, super distinct from the original piece, which using someone's characters probably doesn't give you enough separation. It also depends on how much of the original work you used. If you were like me and you used plenty of quotes from the original book, fair use would not apply. And the effect on the market, which means if you publish your fan fiction, are you going to be accidentally taking money away from the original author? So just claiming that a fan fiction is fair use might not be true, let alone hold up in court. Not to mention that most of these places where the original fanfiction is published have specific policies about this that keep creators from monetizing their work, but also there are some sites where if you publish these stories to our site, we own the story. I assume that the reason they do that is that if there are ads on the sidebar or something like that, then they get all the money from those ads and they don't have to share it with the people making the content on the website. The kicker is how the original creator feels about fan fiction. Most authors are pretty okay with it. A lot of them encourage it and want their readers to go play in their universe. So it kind of depends. The only way that you would be allowed to publish fan fiction, even if the author is okay with people writing it, the only way that you'd be able to publish it and make money is if you get explicit permission from the author that they are okay with you taking their characters, taking their world, and making money off of it and not giving them any type of kickback, which is just basically impossible. So basically, to bind and sell fan fiction, it is pretty much almost guaranteed to be illegal unless you make enough changes from the original intellectual property, which would mean you would have to change the characters and stuff like that, which is why I was kind of so shocked to see people binding and selling Manacled as Dramione fanfiction without changing anything about it. And I think it's hard to draw the line because there are obviously people who just wanted it on their bookshelves because they love it so much that they printed it and put it together. And then there's some people who are selling bound copies. There are some people who sell services to bind anything you want, which is you can send them in a fan fiction and they'll bind it and make the money off of it. And then there's some people who are selling the covers so that you can print it, but you can get the covers from me. And so there's like just a lot of gray area here. And I don't know how these people are getting things printed. Maybe if they don't have actual names on it, because a long time ago, I wanted to make some cute little Harry Potter covers for my books with little designs that I made, but I had the titles typed out on them. And when I took them to go get printed at Staples, they literally would not print them. It didn't care if I was gonna pay for it, nothing. They were like, we literally can't print it because we could get in so much legal trouble. But obviously it isn't stopping some people, because I have seen those services to make fan fiction books. I have seen a trilogy of Manacled being sold for nearly $500. And it's not like people don't know that this isn't legal, because I was on Reddit and someone was like, yeah, I can tell you where to get your fan fiction bound, but you should direct message me because I don't want the person doing this to get in trouble. I just think it's all so interesting. And it's not only in like the book universe. Copyright law has not kept up with the whole creator economy thing anyways. For example, if somebody uses a song in the background of their TikTok and the TikTok makes money, who gets that money? Is it the person who did the song? Is it the person who made the original content? And what if someone stitches them? Who gets the money there? Who owns what and who gets the money off of that content is just like this tangled web that actual legislation has not caught up to yet, because the laws we have aren't prepared for a world where everyone is a content creator. We still have the laws that were created for like big corporations and TV channels. But when you have just, you know, us at our computers making content and making fan fiction, there's not really any specific rules in place. And I feel like a lot of us just kind of operate on almost the honor system, but that means that everybody sort of draws their own line in different places. I mostly made this video because I would love to hear your thoughts. I am all over the side of TikTok right now where people have these bound fan fiction copies, and I'm just so interested in what like the general book community thinks about this. I've mostly seen positive stuff in the comments on TikTok, but it's always something that I've seen as like, you can't go there, if that makes sense. So please let me know what you think in the comments. Do you read fan fiction? Do you bind it? Do you sell it? Do you think we should be able to sell it? And if so, should there be any type of kickback to the original authors? Or do you like the fact that it's just the Wild West out here and think that we should keep it that way? Let me know. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn. Thanks for watching. Bye!